Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, the Lions are on the way to the Super Bowl. The Pistons are going to make the play-in. The Wings are going to make the playoffs, and they're beating preseason teams, scoring 6 goals a game. Michigan State's going to get back to the Final Four. Maybe Tom Izzo's going to win his second national championship. Now that Miguel Cabrera is gone, the Tigers are going to win their division. What is going on in the world of Detroit sports? And all this positivity is getting out of hand. It's even too much for me.
It's getting so positive, Shawn. It's exactly what you wanted to happen for so long. Is you may actually go to cover a Red Wings game. That's how dramatic the teams are improving right now. And I know you like to, you're a bandwagon guy. You like to jump on the teams that are winning because they give you clicks and all that stuff. I get it. But now you don't have to make a choice. Now you can go anywhere.
It's not me clicks. It's not. Let's just. It's funny. I heard somebody the other day talking about they were in radio. They were in radio and they were asked about covering a town and having to come up with a show every day when the professional teams have been so bad for a decade, and what that's like, and how creative and inventive you have to get. We have to do that a little bit too, right? As opinion writers all the time. But the conversation was about, now that the Lions are showing some promise and maybe some other teams are potentially going to be interesting in the next few years, what does that mean? And well, it's fun, but it's ultimately it's good for business. I mean, they were talking about how their ratings go up, our numbers go up, and that's the thing. It's not me. I just the newspaper business is a precarious one. So anytime we can get on a roll, our editor Kirk McCafford and I have talked about this on and off for several years, about what would it be like if we had several teams rolling at once and what that would mean for the business. It would be very good.
It would be, but I think as a journalist, there's a business aspect of it, but then there's a journalism side of it. And, you and I have done this long enough that if you're going to hope that teams are good, you're going to put yourself in a bad situation, because that's not sustainable usually. For a team here and there, yeah, but there are very few dynasties. There's very few teams that stay on rolls for an extended period. They're fun when they're happen, but I think that's wise because they don't happen that often. And, I covered the Lions for a really long time, Shawn, and most of it was horrible, right? A lot of dysfunction. And even the Dan Campbell stuff, when he got hired and it was a rough start, I found that, I have had to learn how to appreciate the struggle, and this is part of it. This is part of that time. And when Dan Campbell, when they went 3-13-1, and they had to basically fire Anthony Lynn midway, and they had to find their way and hire Ben Johnson, and they had to fire Aubrey Pleasant last year and find their way. To me, that's a very interesting arc for a team. And I think that makes it, if you're a Lions fan especially, I think that makes the journey even more rewarding to see where they've come to where they're going. Maybe everybody just wants instant success. Maybe that's what people prefer. But I think you have to appreciate the struggle. And that's, as a journalist, that's what I appreciate, is I like to see it. And the Pistons, the same thing. We're going to see how they do, but same thing, right? High draft picks, Cade Cunningham, injury. That narrative is an interesting narrative if they ever become good. It's part of the journey.
No, it is part of the journey. It's funny. You sound like Tom Izzo, who spent part of his media day on what day was that? Tuesday of this week. And he talked about it. He's like, everybody wants, it's funny. It was almost not quite word for word, but it's close. He's like, everybody wants instant success. He said, but I tell my players every year that when you find some success, it always means a lot more when it's come out of struggle, right? And that's generally probably true in life. And there's no question. And I think Detroit has had its fair share. Now, Michigan State basketball, Michigan football, they've had their moments, although even Michigan State basketball has been not quite to Izzo's standard the last few years. His last great team was cut short with COVID. He had a pretty good team last year, and they started playing well at the end of the year. But we got all these subjects, and we want to kind of speed our way through some of them. But since we're talking about the struggle and success coming out of the struggle, and we just mentioned Tom Izzo, I'm just curious. I got the sense yesterday. It's not that I got the sense. Tom Izzo talked about this. I asked him about this. We talked to some of the players about this. There's always a sense, if the football team is struggling at all up at East Lansing, there's more anticipation for the basketball season. There's also just general anticipation every year for that basketball season because of the program it is. But the folks up there talked specifically, Izzo and some of the players talked about how it was a little different even this year because of what's happened. Partly, Izzo mentioned the shooting last fall. He's even going back to COVID and how it's still not quite the same in terms of engagement in the community. Obviously, the football team and the way Mel Tucker was fired, and just a lot of Spartans just kind of want to put their head in the sand, right? So, do you have that sense? And what do you think? Obviously, Izzo's got a chance to have a really, really good team this year. You never know how that plays out, but it was interesting that was part of the talk yesterday of the extra, not pressure, but weight that they feel to try to help as Izzo said, 650,000 living alums of that university, give them something to kind of change the story a little bit about what that university's been through for the last half decade.
Oh yeah, I mean, I understand that. I believe it. It matters maybe a little bit more for that reason right now, especially with the football program and Tucker. But it's just, I mean, that's just their Cadillac program there at Michigan State, and they've been so good for so long. The experience is tremendous. Breslin is great. I mean, it's just, you couldn't ask for anything more if you're a sports fan, So I don't know if it may be a little bit more unique because of the year that we're coming out of, because of the shooting and Tucker and all that. But I think honestly, I think sure he knows that. The team knows that. They know that their stature is just a little bit different, if not quite a bit different than any other programs, even football on the campus. And I think Graham Couch makes the joke all the time. When Michigan State loses its first game, it's like, how long until basketball season? I think he says that almost every year on Twitter or whatever. And it's true. I mean, it's great. As an outsider, even before I came to Michigan, from the national perspective, Michigan State football does not matter. Michigan State basketball matters a lot. And this is even before Izzo really got going, but certainly now that he's become this, great, iconic coach, you look forward to it. It's like Jim Boeheim, when he was still coaching at Syracuse, right? Nobody cares about Syracuse football, but Syracuse basketball matters on that campus. So that's the difference to me. But maybe it matters a little bit more. But as soon as the ball starts rolling out there for the first tip, I mean, everybody's gonna be happy to be talking about Michigan State. And what kind of team do they have now? I mean, are they gonna? You're kidding? Are you kidding? Or Final Four potential? What do you think about this year?
Well, I do think they have Final Four potential. It's funny. I was talking to some folks up at State yesterday, and one of the reasons they wanted to have the media day this week, they weren't shy about it, is that there's Michigan State football's on a bye week, and they want to turn the conversation away from football as much as they can. They admitted that, right? I mean, now they have to have the media day at some point. I think Michigan basketball is going to be next week, for example. But
would you want to actually talk? Or are you going to he's going to roll Martelli out there?
Well, it's interesting because he has had some health issues and had some stuff going on.
That's right. He's not back for a while with the heart issue.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I thought that was interesting that they up at State they're not hiding that fact at all that they want to move. Hey, the bye week. God, do we really want 2 straight weeks of how bad this program is? Can we try to find some way? But it's interesting. One thing that really stuck with me is he said, "Look, I don't like it that I feel the extra weight this year, but I'm also privileged to have the chance to do something." He said, and he basically said, "Look, we're not going to change lives, but if you can make people smile a little bit, just think a little bit, take a pride, because you and I talk about this. Universities, it's so different. Your identity's wrapped up into it so much. So if you can lessen that or make a Spartan feel a little bit better about themselves, that's worth something. It's hard to know. I mean, how much that's worth? How do you quantify that? You can't. But it is always trying to downplay. Look, I'm not curing something here, right? So it's just, can you make people feel a little bit lighter? And I guess, that matters. So he's very aware of that. As far as the team, they definitely got Final Four potential. He's got, and I don't want to, we'll get, as the season starts, we can talk about these guys more, but real quickly, he's got 10, 11 guys. They're all good enough to play. They're more than good enough to play. He's going to figure out minutes and rotation And you mentioned Graham Couch. He and I were talking yesterday about chemistry is going to be the biggest thing for these guys, and figuring out how to make sure everybody's together and not starting to worry about minutes and not playing, especially some of the highly touted young folks who these days come in and expect to go right away.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I was at an event a few days ago, and one of the guys there was a golf thing, and one of the guys was talking about his Spartans, proud Spartan alum, and someone else chimed in about the Spartans, and he called them a Walmart Spartan. Like, I've never heard that before, but speaking to the pride in your university and how much you're wrapped up to a Walmart. Now we have Walmart Spartans.
So you can't be a fan of a university unless you go to the university, right?
Which is to me is what's funny is like, Izzo didn't go to Michigan State, right? I mean, it's like like some of the great coaches that Krzyzewski didn't go to Duke. I mean, like, it's just like,
yeah,
whatever.
Most of these coaches are not alums. I mean, Juwan Howard is more.
He's a
rarity, right? Yeah,
yeah. No, so, but it's just funny how they become the iconic image and face of that program, even never having set foot on the campus before they got hired there.
No, for sure. But all right, look, the season doesn't start up for another month or so, or close to it, I want to say. And along with Michigan basketball, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. But let's we're going to get to the Lions here because they're the biggest deal in town and one of the great stories they're becoming the darlings of the NFL a little bit. We'll see if they keep winning. But before we get to the Lions, we want to mention. You want to talk about Miguel Cabrera and his last weekend and the Tigers and how we covered and how he was covered in general. And let me set the stage real quick for you. He was here for 16 years. 9 of them were all-time great, right? First ballot Hall of Fame great, to the point where people are like, he's one of the best 2 or 3 right-handed hitters who ever stepped in a batter's box. So and considering you got 120 years of the sport or whatever, more than that, that's pretty impressive. Followed by 7 years of not so great, mediocre, maybe really to his standard, not even mediocre, right? If you're just going by what he'd become. So that makes it a little bit tricky. So you got 7 years between the time when he was must-see viewing to, wow, he's making $30 million a year and he can't even hit 250.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you think about covering him and writing about him in the last week? And how do you think overall, just from our larger media and the way we covered him and what the response was? Because, fans ate it up.
Yeah, it was very interesting because my philosophy, when you're writing about somebody, kind of this holistic, career view, wrap up, is try to give a complete picture, the good and the bad. I don't think it's fair to villainize somebody, if they had a rough landing at the end, just they're nothing but bad or whatever, or, however you want to paint it, or the other way, if they were, just make them out to be this, godlike creature, this hero, this infallible subject. So I try to bring balance anytime I do that, whether it's Cabrera or anybody else. I think you need to put that in there. But, Shawn, we talked about this a lot. Different people took different tacks. And that's what makes our business interesting, is you can make that choice. You can make different kinds of choices. And I got a lot of criticism from readers, emails, tweets, whatever. But I also got a lot of people really liking what I did too. You cannot please everybody. You're never going to please everybody. If you chase that, you're lost. So you got to go with what you believe is right, what your convictions are. And especially the last day, we were both there for his final day for the season ender on Sunday. And the thing that I heard a lot, I'm sure you heard a lot too, was, this is just Miggy's day. You need to just celebrate Miggy, and why bring up any other stuff about his struggles and his issues and how much he kind of hamstrung the organization with his contract and all these things. And you know, some fans, it's understandable that they believe that they just want nothing but just positive, glowing. Have him go out on a high on a rocket ship where he'll be my hero forever. I'm going to wear that Cabrera jersey until I die. That's their right. Some people, prefer to see it that way, and other people prefer to say, "Hey, you can't just, excuse the entire past that not only he's responsible for, but the organization certainly is responsible for." Did you feel the same way? Did you feel you got equal amounts of blowback and praise, or how people perceived your coverage?
Probably more blowback than praise. I mean, I definitely had folks that appreciated what I tried to do and understood what I tried. I shouldn't say it like that. It makes it sound like I'm not, but just agreed with what I tried to do. How about that? And not understood. That's really ridiculous and pretentious. But yeah, no, I probably got more criticism than praise, and that's okay. I wasn't hard on Cabrera per se. I was just I just included everything that happened. I wrote about his entire arc in Detroit, and it's interesting. You think about how you. Oftentimes, when you're talking, oftentimes it's interesting. So we do have tone in writing, obviously. But it's not quite the same as when you're speaking. If you're telling a story to somebody, if you're on the radio or on television, whatever, television, you obviously have the visual, but the tone is so important about what you're trying to express along with the words. And it's funny because I wrote a Pistons column, and we'll talk about the Pistons, not my column in a second, but just sometimes the sounds that accompany the words can really change the meaning or heighten the meaning or whatever. But I think the tone is with Cabrera, with what I wrote, was more about how I structured it. In other words, I started my column off with how much you'd struggled the last 7 years. That's literally my first couple sentences. If I had started off a few paragraphs of how great he's been and what an emotional weekend that's been, and then written he struggled for the last 7 years, even just 3-4 paragraphs in, I don't bet I would have gotten as much criticism, because then that shades the rest of the piece. That's the first impression is obviously the first couple of sentences. And a lot of times that sticks with a reader through the rest of the piece. So no matter how much you come back and say, well, he was great at this, at that point, you've already kind of, popped the balloon because you're saying, well, you stunk for the last 7 years. I didn't use that language, and I thought a lot about that. And I think about that kind of stuff all the time, just writing and how you structure, because that's our tone. That's one of the ways we can convey tone. Obviously, we can convey tone with the words we use, but that's one way you can convey tone that you can't do. I mean, that you do when it reminds me of a tone with speaking. But so anyway, that's it didn't surprise me that I got all that criticism, Carlos.
I was surprised actually that I didn't get more criticism, because I got a fair amount of people happy with, pleased with whatever I wrote, that they like the balance. And I believe that, generally speaking, I have no scientific proof of this, but we used to have this old thing in the newspaper that we used to say, the editors used to say all the time, was every time you get a phone call in the office, it represents 100 readers, I believe they would say. Or maybe it was 1,000, I forget. But it was like, so don't dismiss. If somebody's calling, they represent a lot of people, because the person who's moved to call wants some action taken, right? So to me, generally, more people tend to write to you or respond to you when they're critical, they're angry about something, right? People have their airing grievances. People are more moved by that emotion than happiness, generally speaking. And so for every probably, praising comment, I would say it's those people represent 2 or 3 people versus the negative comments represent fewer, because those people come straight at you. And people aren't as quick to praise, I think, generally. So in this kind of situation, I mean, when you're writing a, really glowing profile or something like that, people are just always going to like it. But yeah, so I try not to read into that too much, but I do try not to be dismissive either. And I like people to have their say. It's one of the great things about social media to me, is that people feel like they have their say, like they can respond, and because, readers and fans have largely voiceless for so long, and now they get their turn to kind of, fire back and
They
have
do.
their say.
They do. No, and I don't dismiss that at all. I mean, the one thing I try to do in the first piece I wrote about Cabrera, not the piece off his final game, which is more just trying to capture the scene and so forth, for the paper. But the first
piece
I
into
wrote,
that scene too.
I tried to. I wanted to capture the sense that so many of us have and write about so many of us, the feeling so many of us have watching an all-time great decline and then eventually wrap it up. And it's interesting because in baseball, I think it's different in baseball than any other sport. There's no way you can hang on in the NFL for 7 years. First of all, you can get hurt, right? I mean, it's just physically you can't do it. In basketball, occasionally you see somebody hang on for a while that's not anywhere near their prime, but that stretch is usually not that long. You get cut, right? It's just different. Kobe was, to use your hometown, Kobe was not quite the same the last few years, and he tore his Achilles and so forth. But it wasn't a 7-year stretch, right? So you rarely. Kareem was another one who was, had a somewhat elongated decline, but again, he was still productive when you get out on the court, and for the most part until the very end. So I don't know that you see it in hockey. It's really baseball.
It's baseball
where you can have, or golf, but that's not a team sport, right? So the rooting interests are different. Where you have somebody out there performing that's so far past their prime. So, and it can be, you can relate it to life and to the cycle of life and how you think about your own career. And when you get to retirement, you get closer to the end of your life. And I wanted to capture some of that in the piece that I wrote. So I did have some people respond and really liked that and really connected with that and thought that was, so I had some really nice words for that. So at least that it's nice when people pick up on that. But hey, like you said, it's also fine that people just didn't want to hear about his struggle. And that's fine. I respect that. Like to your point.
What was it like? We were there the final day. And, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are aware of all the honors they gave him, and his kids were there and all that stuff, and the play at first base. Tigers did a fantastic job, with that. But what was it like? Just, you and I were both in the clubhouse there. Those final moments with him and that day. What did it feel like to you? Did it feel like the appropriate send off? Did Miggy do anything different to you? Was he just kind of the same he's always been? What did you? How did you take away?
It was a nice send off again, but it's a little bit different because it's baseball, and you can have these iconic players that are. I mean, he's 40 years old, right? Derek Jeter, I think, was 40 or close to it, and Cabrera never connected nationally like Jeter did. He didn't play in New York. He didn't win all those World Series, but I thought about a lot of things. I mean, the ceremony was cool in a way. The cynical part of me thinks, is this a little much? Is this a little over the top? Is it a little?
Did you not get emotional at all?
It is a little drawn out. I thought it was fun when the ball was hit to him at first, when he got to go into first base. I thought, and seeing his family react, and I was thinking a lot about this though. There's been some criticism of Detroit's fans, or some fans ripping on the other Detroit fans for like, look, yeah, he was great, but he didn't win, right? And so often we make this a zero-sum game in sports, or we make it so black and white. Now, I agree. If Cabrera had been part of a World Series title, he'd be even a little more fondly loved, or a little bit more loved and fondly remembered. No question. But I think that if it's just winning and losing, you can't be a sports fan all your life and have it just be that. You just can't. I know that's what you care about the most. And that's, coaches are hired and fired, and players, all of that. That's how we do the business of sports. But as a fan, you can't spend 60 years, Carlos, or 70 years or 50 years, or whatever, just caring about winning and losing. It's not enough. There are 30 teams in every league, and you may go half your life or all your life without seeing winning. So what else is going to keep bringing you back? At some point, it's got to be about the play and the movement and the sport itself. And I think that's why Cabrera is so loved, because he was so good. Now, obviously, his teams won, not the whole thing, but they were good and they were competitive, and that helps a lot. But he was so good. It's like Barry Sanders. He's beloved because he was thrilling to watch. right? Now, he was part of a few good teams, but and would he be more beloved if he were a Super Bowl champ? Maybe. But I think that what we've seen in Cabrera is a reminder of this, that it can't just be about winning and losing. At some point, greatness is greatness. And I think that's what we witnessed.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, you're right. I mean, baseball's so different. I hope people aren't too wrapped up and he didn't win. And I mean, you one guy can't make that much of a difference. Even if you're a pitcher, you can't make that much of a difference through the playoffs and the World Series to win a title. You know, I mean, some great players, you know, Cal Ripken never won a World Series. I mean, it's like, how much can one player do on a roster? Mike Trout may never win a World Series. You know, Shohei Ohtani, if he stays with the Angels, you know, you can't control that no matter how great you are. It's a team effort. And I think Barry, I mean, it's like probably the view on Barry is, well, he was the only hope they had. I mean, without him, forget it. I mean, he was the only thing that gave them hope. You know, Calvin was kind of the same way, right? It's like, without Calvin, geez, where would they have been without Calvin? At least they were winning, you know, flirting with 500 with Calvin. So, and then, you know, quarterbacks are different. Quarterbacks are measured much differently. And, you know, but I don't think with Cabrera, I think with him and you know, he was, the thing, and the Jeter comparison is interesting because he was, you know, what do they call him in New York? The captain, right? He was a leader. Right. And not only did he win, but he was a leader. And that's the problem with Cabrera, I think, is that he was the antithesis of a leader. He was not a leader at all. He didn't like speaking with media at all. He avoided it. Some people say he didn't like the attention. I mean, I think he didn't like the responsibility of it. And that's one of the things that's probably, you know, some of the off-field issues too. You know, sometimes when you've got struggles, it changes your perspective on how open you're willing to be. It's probably the thing that's going to keep him from being a unanimous selection as a first ballot Hall of Famer. The off-field stuff and, you know, how he comported himself, but also, you know, the lack of leadership, where you never know how much of a difference that makes, but it's certainly for a player of his stature, I think that would have made a difference. And we heard a lot of stories over the years, and certainly at the end about, hey, he gave this guy an attaboy and that guy an attaboy, and you belong here and blah, blah, blah. And people were scared to talk to. I mean, it was one who's Jake Rogers was telling the story on the final day. And he was saying how he was with the team for almost a year. And he didn't talk to Miggy, and he was scared. He was intimidated to go up and talk to him. And he finally did at some point. And Miggy said, "Why did it take you so long?" And, you know, everybody laughed. And I felt, well, why did it take Miggy so long to not go up to this young guy and say, "Hey, I'm Miguel Cabrera. It's great to have you on the team, man. I'm a fan of your catching. You really frame pitches well." Nothing. Zero. It took him a year. He didn't go up to a young kid. Like, what kind of I just don't understand that kind of stuff, you know? And there's so many, I won't get into it. I'm not going to get into the telling tales out of school, but you and I have a lot of friends in the media, and so many of them were frustrated for so many different ways, with Cabrera. And it just, I think he could have been a much better professional, because everybody always called him a big kid, right? And it's like, oh, he's a big kid. He's just a goofy guy, this and that. He's playful. Well, also, the truth is, when you're a kid, you shirk your responsibility a lot of time. And I think that's what he did. And he didn't care. He was just like, yeah, I'm a great player. And I wrote that one time. One of the privileges of greatness is you can do whatever you want, and it's excused. So he got away with that. And he was a great, great player, but he could have been more. He could have been a more complete player, a leader that may have made a difference. We don't know, but I'm guessing it would have. I mean, we've been around teams enough. Leadership matters on teams. And it's all this, like, I'm leading by example. That's such a cop-out. And it's in every sport, lead by example. That means I'm not going to do anything more than I'm going to do me, and you follow me if you want, but, you know, I'm not going to extend myself to helping other people. I'm not going to push you away, but, you know, do what I do if you want to be great like me. But that doesn't, I don't think that cuts it. So that's my, but that day, and Cabrera was the same. He talked for about 10 minutes in the clubhouse afterward, and, no great insight as usual. And that was it. And maybe we'll see what he does now. And AJ Hinch, one of the things when we were talking to him in the post game was, what happens? What happens when you're done? When you're done playing, you've spent your life, this has been your life's work for anybody, whether it's him or Cabrera. And he said after the season, when his usual routine kicks in, when he would get ready for the season, go to his batting instructor, his private guy, and this and that. And when none of that is there, he said that's when the hollowness kicks in of what is my life now? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing with myself? And he's going to be an special assistant to the team president, Scott Harris, but that role is really not defined. He's probably going to go down and coach a little bit in spring training, but it's going to be interesting to see what he does with the rest of his professional career, which starts in spring training.
Okay,
it's a lot. Sorry, too much.
No. It's okay. Look, we're going to take a break. I'm going to push back a little bit on the leadership thing. He could not have been more, and I'm going to tell you why right after the break, and we're getting to the Lions. But
great tease.
Yeah. All right, we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. All right. When we say somebody could have been this, I don't buy it because they're not capable of it. I don't think Miguel Cabrera is capable of that. I just don't. And it's like any other group of human beings. You put 20 people in a room. How many are natural leaders? 1, 2, at best. The leadership by example, people say that because when you get somebody that has a certain routine, let's say, and they're really, really good at what they do, and there's a method to the way they are great, the way they keep themselves in shape. That's what they mean. And that is important. And it is important for young people, young athletes, especially when they're coming in, to see the level of work it takes for somebody who's that good. And that's all that means. It's a cliche, but there's truth to it. With Cabrera, I was always told, even Jim Leland said he was great with younger players or just even his peers and talking hitting if they wanted to talk hitting. So the Jake Rogers thing surprised me because it was usually more the other way around. I always used to wonder how much of it was the language. And I had people tell me that the weight, the heaviness he felt, the responsibility to his home country, Venezuela, that it suffocated him and that he didn't know how to do it and didn't know how to handle it. And as we saw when the news broke, right, that he had alcohol struggles and so forth, that was in part related to the expectation in this home country where he was the kind of star Michael Jordan was here, right? And he just didn't know how to handle it. And I remember this is a long time ago, but I don't think he was capable of being a leader. So do you fault somebody that's not wired a certain way? I mean, that's a tricky thing. Look, he could have been friendlier to the media, although that's neither here nor there. But I never heard stories that he was a bad teammate. It's interesting we mentioned Jeter earlier, and Jeter was known as the captain. The skill that Derek Jeter had that Miguel Cabrera didn't, aside from being in the country where his native tongue is the language, and that's a big thing to me. Derek Jeter said nothing. He never said. I was at Yankee Stadium for probably 6 or 7, maybe even 8 series when I used to cover baseball all the time. And I'd be at Jeter's locker. Eventually, they were bringing him. Same with Alex Rodriguez. They bring him to a little interview room because they were just too big of stars. But he never said nothing. He was great, and almost like a coach. So I thought of Jeter as like having another manager in the clubhouse, right? In that way, kind of the way he carried himself, he was almost imperious in a way. And Cabrera was like having a position coach, and who just wanted to hide out and then geek out on hitting. And but Jeter had that skill of looking like, giving you the sense that you could know him, or and he had this kind of cool vibe, or he's stepping out of a Ferrari or whatever, and got somebody on his arm walking into the latest hip restaurant and down in on Soho. So that was all part of the mystique with him. And he had handlers, but he never said it. So we thought we knew him, but we didn't. And so Cabrera, we don't know him. But in some ways, to me, that's more authentic. But in any case, I'm not trying to say Cabrera was perfect. He wasn't, and he could be difficult. But for us, and fans and readers don't care about that at all, and that's fine. They probably shouldn't. The athletes don't owe us anything. But that's how I think about it. Are you wired? Do you have the chemistry in your brain to be able to navigate and handle stuff like that? Or don't you? And do you fault somebody if they don't?
Well, it was funny because I had completely forgotten about this. And a reader sent me an email about this when speaking to the leadership issue. And they said, you know what? Octavio Dotel was right all those years ago. This was, I want to say around 2013 probably or so, 12 or 13. And Octavio Dotel, pitcher with the Tigers, called him out for not being a leader, that he's all about himself. He's not calling team meetings when he should, when the team was struggling. He later apologized for it because I think he got so much blowback. And, I don't know if it was Leland at the time or whoever the manager, I think it must have been Leland, who probably told him, you got to make this right because there's going to be problems in the clubhouse. And he did. He walked it back. But I think his initial comments were probably on the mark. And I think the difference is, let me put it this way, there's some guys that right? Some guys, like a Charles Rogers kind of guy, like a happy-go-lucky kind of guy, that, they're just not going to be leaders. They're just not, it's not within them. Even somebody like Calvin Johnson was he was quiet, and wasn't this natural leader. But Cabrera had it within him. And I think when you're an all-time player, there should be a different expectation for you. You have a stature not only with the team but within the game. And when you don't step up and go a little further, I mean, the Red Wings have this sign in their dressing room, right? The Tigers should have it too because they're owned by the same company. But to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think when you're paying that much money to this guy, when he is a great one of the great players we've ever seen in the game, he needs to do a little more. And he says, Miguel Cabrera. I know you don't like me calling him Miggy. Everybody calls him Miggy.
No, call him what you want.
He's smart. He's not stupid. He's not dumb. His English is not that bad. He hides behind it convenient. Like the joke was sometimes reporters would go up to him and he's like, no, today my English not so good, whatever. He could speak English.
It got a lot better for sure. I remember
it got better. He could.
I first covered him when he first got here, you could, a lot of times it was hard to understand him.
Well,
so it got better, as it does for everybody, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the Lions have a full-time interpreter on the team. And he can totally understand. He's fluent in understanding English. And he's fairly proficient in speaking it. But if he had any problem, he could be, hey, speak Spanish. Do it in Spanish if you want, and we'll have it translated. No problem. They're paying people to do that for you. But you're right. Some people don't have it within them. I think Miggy was smart enough, knew enough about the game that he could have done that. He could have been a better leader.
But you can't call it with his team. Look, man, you can't call him a big kid. You can't call somebody a big kid and then say be a leader. Those are opposite ideas, and they clash. If you have the personality,
you got to grow up sometimes. When you're a kid, you got to grow up.
Yeah, but he is not in that way. I think we mistake. He's convivial and conversational at first base or whatever, and he is smart, and he's a genius when it comes to the sport. But those are still different things. I don't think we can say, hey, he's a big kid at 40, but hey, why aren't you a leader? Well, you're not a leader because you're a big kid. And that's fine.
I don't think you have to be George Patton or MacArthur or something, but you got to throw your arm around teammates more often and bring them in and hold your teammates. Anybody who played sports knows that sometimes you got to step up. If you're a leader, if you're one of the better players on a team, and things aren't going great sometimes, or if they are, both ways, I don't think Yzerman honestly was a natural leader. I mean, I think he was a quiet guy and he willed himself. He knew he had to do this. He knew that this is what he had to do to make this team better, is call people out, have meetings, have whatever.
Right. He had that in him.
It's hard to do it. Most people don't like to do it.
Had it in him. Nicholas Lidstrom had it in him. Pavlo Datsuk was one of the best players in hockey when he was in his peak, right? And one of the most skilled players of the modern hockey era, a magician with the stick, right? And what he could do when he was skating. I mean, it was beautiful to watch. There's no way he was ever going to lead. Now you can say, okay, well, Russian language and so forth. Well, Nick Lidstrom turned himself into a captain. He came from, he spoke Swedish. So it depends on the individual, for sure. But should Datsuk have been a leader because he was one of the best players in the league? No, he shouldn't have.
No, but you had Zetterberg on the team at the time, and he was a better player, and Lidstrom and those guys.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have to Cabrera was so far ahead of anybody else in that clubhouse that it's like
Justin Verlander was just as good a pitcher, more or less just as good a pitcher as he was a hitter. Right. And nobody ever criticized him for not being a leader, and he was not a leader at all. Justin Verlander.
No, but he did talk. He talked a lot. He didn't talk.
So
after
there was
games
the impression. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but I don't know that any of that was authentic. I mean, I'm just saying that's the thing. We get
harder for pitchers to be leaders too.
Pardon me?
It's a little harder for pitchers to be leaders. It's not as common because they're not everyday players.
I mean, pitchers are seen as quirkier and so forth. It's just, look, you're right that obviously, I mean, teams need leadership. And when they don't have it with the players, they tend to struggle. I mean, there's got to, no matter how talented a team is, the pieces got to fit. There's got to be some kind of harmony. There's obviously going to be issues in every team and any group of human beings. Exactly. Right.
You know what?
Not everybody. You can't. I just don't. I've never believed in criticizing people for not being leaders. If they've got it in them, they'll be a leader. If not, they're not.
Well, I guess everybody can just say I don't have it in me, Shawn, and just it's excuse it because I don't feel like nobody.
Yeah, because most people are not leaders. How many people? Put 50 people in a room. How many people are leaders?
Leaders aren't born; they're made. I mean, it's like you're called to action.
The Golden State Warriors have one of the 10 best players in the history of the NBA, and he is not the leader of that team. Should we criticize Steph Curry for not being a leader?
Well, if you have another leader, that's different. I think if you have somebody who is a leader on the team already, then those roles sort themselves out because it's not always the best player. You're right, but in the absence of that, if you have no natural leader, then what do? Right? I mean, then you need somebody to. I mean, I thought this, Shawn. I don't know if you ever thought this, but as he was going to decline, as we saw that this contract how it was going to play out, and nobody ever thought he was going to be great when he was in his late 30s or in his year 40 season. But certainly, you would expect that decline. I thought maybe he'll become more of a Coach Miggy and adding value to the team that way, helping other players come along and, hey, I'm going to can't do it on the field as much anymore, but I'm going to try to bring other guys along and whatever in a different capacity.
I mean, he tried to. I mean, we read story after story. Spencer Torkelson talked about it the other day about what a difference Cabrera made in him. It's the little things. And that's, I mean, you call that leadership? I don't know.
He did some.
Yeah, no, he did. And Leland always used to say he was always good with that. It's just the criticism he got from his teammate was there's no way he was ever going to get in the middle of the clubhouse and talk to the team. It just ain't in him. I mean, that's probably true. Like, what's a good example of this? I was at the Pistons media day, right? Pistons media day the other day, Carlos, and Stuart Thompson, the rookie. The Pistons rookie, one of the two rookies, sorry, but was asked about Cade Cunningham. He said, yeah, the first thing you notice when you get around him is, I'm like, you're really 22? He sounds like a 10-year vet. And it's true. And Cunningham carried himself that way from the first minute you meet him. Are you born with that or you learn that?
Probably you learn it. I don't think you're born with it.
Is Jaden Ivey ever going to be a leader on that team? I don't know if Jaden Ivey's ever going to be a great player or not, but I doubt he's ever a leader. And that's not a criticism. It's just not who he is. One of the reasons they drafted Cunningham.
I think if you're a great player, it's something different is expected of you.
Yeah, by people like you, but not necessarily by coaches and who understand that 1 out of every 20 human beings has got that in them, or 10 human beings or whatever. Izzo's talked about, getting back to Izzo for a second, he's talked about it where he's had years. He's got 15 players on the roster. He's got, I don't know, 10, 12 scholarship players, however many. He's had teams where he hadn't had a single leader, no matter how much he's tried. Because yes, you can learn to become a better leader, but if you don't have a certain quality to you, certain few qualities to you, you'll never be one. To me, it's like an artist.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but that's also college versus pros. It's different.
But there are pro teams that don't have leaders, and the teams stink. Excuse me, I almost said another word, and I don't want to get in trouble with our.
Robbie can bleep you. That's
right.
Fine.
No, but seriously, there are pro teams that don't have leaderships or leaders, and those teams aren't.
They don't go very far
good.
Usually.
No, they don't. Not at all. Not at all. But all right, we should talk about the Lions for a second.
Yes.
You wrote a fun column about, I think it's your weekly Road to the Playoffs column. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
About Jameson Williams being back. And you're trying to temper the expectations. Your buddy Dan Campbell was obviously trying to do the same. And you're like, okay, we're finally in alignment. The coach and I finally see something in the same way. So that felt good. BFF. So what do you think we're going to see from Jameson Williams when they play Carolina at Ford Field?
I'd say 200 yards and 4 touchdowns, I think, is a reasonable expectation for JMO. Yeah, no, I think people are, it's interesting because the Lions are walking a fine balance of answering questions about what does he potentially add to this offense versus what does he need to do right away? What are the immediate expectations versus what are the long-term expectations potential? And they've spoken the truth. Campbell and other coaches, Antoine Rondelet, his receivers coach, they've said, he needs to do the little things right. He needs to not be taking a step back. He was off for about 5 weeks or so with the gambling suspension, and he needed to be in shape. Still understand the playbook, understand where he needs to be, when he needs to be there, all that stuff, all the little details. That there's no excuse for him not at least understanding that. The game shape will be different. Getting ready to play, whatever it might be, 50 snaps, full game. That's not going to happen right away. They're going to use him more as a support role, I think Dan Campbell called it. So. And I think they should do that. I think they need to really kind of work him in slowly, not give him too much, build his confidence up. And I think that's what the fans, unfortunately, they're frustrated because last year he came in and he was hurt. He missed almost the whole season and did very little. He had 1 catch. And then this year, he gets a suspension. So he's gone after the preseason, and he also had a hamstring issue at the end of the preseason. So it always feels like fans have been waiting for the Jameson Williams career to really get going. All this potential, the 12th overall pick, all this stuff. And there's probably some frustration there, right? Some questions about maturity. But I think with him, it's just going to take some patience with him. I think he has time this season. If he stays healthy, I think he has time this season to find his way, find his rhythm with Jared Goff, get on the same page, and all that stuff. That will come, I think. I expect it, but I won't think it'll come for a few games. It may take till close to the bye week, after the bye week, for him to really get in the flow and get to the rim. I mean, do you think that's unfair? Or do you want 100 yards right away, Shawn? Is that or nothing else?
I don't think that's unfair at all. I don't think it's unfair at all. I think of course it's going to take time. He's got so much speed that maybe there's a random play where he takes a short cross or catches a little out 7-8 yards down the field and turns upfield and the DB slips and he's 60 yards down the sideline. You could see something like that. In fact, Dave Burkett wrote a good piece kind of talking about he talked with Randall L., right, about his experience in Pittsburgh, and a receiver there had sort of similar speed. His name escapes me, sorry, but the idea was that everybody thinks of a speedy receiver as just catching a 40-yard ball down the sideline, right? But what that kind of speed can do is you take a short pass, and if there's a lane, you're gone. And so maybe he catches something like that in the next few games, and you're like, oh, okay. And you see that, but I'm with you. It's going to take a while. I would think, and I mean, they're still trying to work Jahmyr Gibbs in. Jameson Williams is essentially a rookie in terms of playing time, right? This will be his, when he plays against Carolina Sunday, this will be his 7th game or 8th game? 7th game, 8th game? Not even half a season.
Yeah.
7. So he's in a lot of ways a rookie. He missed the first training camp. He missed because, he was covered from an ACL injury. The second one, he missed part of it because of hamstring. So he's essentially a rookie. And they've got to figure out how to get him going, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's going to be interesting to watch. Meanwhile, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Josh Reynolds are just going to keep it steady, and the defense keeps doing its thing. That they should be fine. All right, let's take one more quick break, Carlos, and go back with favorite thing.
Perfect. My favorite thing, which is I'm stealing from you this year or this time.
All right, we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Well, welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. It's that time of the show. We get to hear Carlos's favorite thing. And that's really all that matters. You don't need a favorite thing from me. Let's hear it, bud.
Actually, my favorite thing is inspired by you, Shawn, because we were talking about this last week when I was in Green Bay, and we were chatting on the phone. I'm standing just came back from a wonderful breakfast at Denny's, on our very generous daily allowance for eating. So it was wonderful. And I'm sitting in the parking lot. We're talking on the phone, and you told me a really fun story, a really great story about how back when you were young, you knew a young lady who was a witch, who confessed to you that she was a witch, and it was just a fun, fabulous story. One of these quirky Windsorian tales, which is what your book should be called. And it just reminded me of the time when we were all young people in our early 20s, and we had more of these kind of encounters with people who were very interesting, who came through our lives and passed through and would tell us interesting things about themselves. And I guess when you're young, you figure that this will always be the way, that you'll always just meet different kinds of people in your life. But your circle of friends, your sphere of people that you interact with as you get older, really get smaller. And it's harder to make friends, obviously, when you get older, as you have families and all these other things and kids and different responsibilities. You don't have as much free time, unless you're Shawn Windsor and you're Mr. Man About Town, but most of us aren't. So our circles get smaller, and we don't meet these people as much, and these interesting people. And it made me try to go back and think about my time and around that age in college, a little bit after, and all the different people that maybe I hadn't thought about in a long time. And I never met a witch, Shawn, but I wish I had. So it made me really happy to know that you had that experience, and that person is out there probably still somewhere. And hopefully I don't get hexed for this. But that was my favorite thing last week.
I hope that person is still out there. Yeah, it's true. The older you get, for most of us, your world does tend to shrink a little bit. And, you try to get out, and it's not that, I don't go out and party or do anything like that, but it's easy to get into a place where you're not socializing much, especially these days. COVID obviously kind of gave us all permission to retreat and cocoon, so to speak, and huddle up with a person or two and have that be socially okay, and nobody's saying, hey, what's wrong with him or her? They're never coming out. COVID kind of gave us permission to do that. And I think a lot of us have kept that. And you combine the fact that you can bring everything into your house now electronically. You can stream everything, and the quality of, some people might have different ideas, but you can get good television programs from all over the world in your living room or your den or wherever it is, your bedroom. And that's made it even easier, Carlos, to stay home. You can travel that way almost. Right? I've seen a lot of parts of the world. Now, if it's a fictional show, it's you don't know how completely accurate that is to the culture, but you still pick up a lot of stuff, and it just, I guess, it gets easier and easier. Obviously, with all the services to bring food to your house, to bring groceries to your house, to bring any kind of service to your house, it's just gotten harder and harder. So I try to socializing for me isn't just going to meet people, although I do try to do that from time to time. I've come to your softball games a couple times. It's the experience of getting out and seeing something a little, going to Belle Isle and watch it. But to me, it's just even little things like, I run errands for people. I like to go pick up a prescription for somebody. I like to drop somebody dinner if I'm going to get, Thai food at a carryout. Hey, can I drop you something? I try to do that, have those little interactions. And that's basically my social life, talking to people behind the registers, conversation, just small talk. But it's not always small talk either. It's not deep personal talk, but at least you're staying connected. So that's and I don't have a specific example of that this week, but I've done that. I do that all the time. So that'd be my favorite thing for this past week. It's just, and I feel fortunate that sometimes it's, I had to get up early and take somebody to the airport or do this or whatever. But no, I feel like that's a privilege, and the older you get, like you said, the harder it is to meet people. So just being out in the world and doing the mundane stuff, I think is not a bad thing. It helps keep the world from shrinking. So that's my favorite thing.
People are your favorite thing, and connecting with them.
Yeah. All right, we need to thank Robin Chan for making this possible. How about Robin's our favorite thing, because he's always our favorite thing. So
he makes that would be possible. Redundant.
I want to thank you. We don't need to thank anybody else, do we? Oh, I guess we need to thank the Kirkland Crawford, sports editor Anjanette Delgado, and Nicole Avery Nichols, the editor of the Free Press. And who else do we need to thank, Carlos? The listener?
Our one listener. We need to thank them for sticking with us and making this show possible. And if you like what you hear from Shawn, if you agree with him, as you better, or you're gonna be wrong, drop us a line.
That's okay.
Wherever you hear this, send him an email, a text, a DM, whatever you want, and subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Spotify or Apple or MySpace. And let us know what you think. Rate us, subscribe, and let Shawn know how much you love him.
No. I'm often wrong. Although this is a podcast for MySpace, that sounds good. No, I'm wrong all the time. That's the point. All right, it was fun, Carlos, as usual. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back with you next week. More Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.